This is Max and Mia podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Max and Mia podcast.
Hey there. We're really glad you're joining us today. Whether you're listening during your morning commute, at the gym, or just relaxing at home, thank you for spending some time with us.
Absolutely. You know, Max, we've been doing this podcast for a while now, and one thing we've realized is that we have listeners from so many different corners of the world.
That's true. And honestly, that's one of the most exciting parts about this. We get messages from people in South America, Europe, Asia. It's incredible. But here's the thing. We want to get to know you better.
Exactly. So today, we have a small request. After you finish listening to this episode, head over to the comments section and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, what you love about your country. Maybe it's the food, the landscapes, the people, or even something small like a local tradition.
And also, if there's something you'd wish was different about your country, feel free to share that too. We're all learning here, and hearing different perspectives helps us understand the world a little better.
Plus, it's a fantastic way to practice your writing skills. And who knows? You might discover that someone else in the comments is from your country, or you might learn something fascinating about a place you've never been to.
We really believe this community can be something special, a space where people from all walks of life come together to learn, share, and grow. So don't be shy.
All right, now that we've got that covered, let's dive into today's topic.
So, what do we have in store for everyone today?
Well, today's episode is going to be particularly useful because we're focusing on real-life situations that many travelers face. We'll be exploring some essential vocabulary and grammar structures that will help you tell stories and describe past events more naturally.
Throughout the episode, you'll hear the past continuous tense being used in context. You know, when you're describing what was happening at a specific moment in the past. We'll also cover emotional vocabulary that you can use when things don't go according to plan.
And we'll look at the difference between will and going to when talking about future plans and decisions. These are topics that often confuse learners, but hearing them in real conversations makes everything clearer.
Exactly. So we have a couple of short stories for you today. The first one involves a travel nightmare, something that I think many of us can relate to.
Oh, definitely. In this first conversation, you'll hear someone describing a really stressful situation at the airport. Pay attention to how they express panic, chaos, and those racing thoughts that go through your mind when everything seems to be falling apart.
And then in the second part, we'll hear how they managed to solve the problem. Was there a happy ending? Well, you'll have to listen to find out.
All right. Let's go ahead and listen to our first story. Here we go.
Oh my God, Emma, you won't believe what happened to me last Tuesday. I was at the airport and I suddenly realized I couldn't find my passport anywhere.
No way! What were you doing when you noticed it was missing?
I was standing in line at the check-in counter and the woman behind the desk asked me for my documents. I reached into my bag and nothing. My heart was pounding so hard, I started panicking immediately.
I can imagine what was going through your mind at that moment.
Everything, honestly. I was thinking about all the money I'd spent on the trip, the hotel reservations, the plans I'd made with my friends. My hands were shaking while I was searching through my bag for the third or fourth time. People behind me were getting impatient, and I could feel their eyes on me.
That sounds absolutely terrifying. What did you do next?
I stepped out of the line and went to a corner of the terminal. I was frantically emptying my entire backpack on the floor. My phone was ringing because my friends were already at the gate, wondering where I was. Meanwhile, the departure board was showing that my flight was boarding. I felt like I was in a nightmare.
Were you crying?
Almost. I was trying so hard to stay calm, but my eyes were filling with tears. I kept asking myself, where did I put it? When did I last see it? I was retracing every single step I'd taken that morning, leaving my apartment, getting into the taxi, arriving at the airport.
And the airport was probably packed with people, right?
Oh, it was chaos. Families were running around, announcements were echoing through the speakers, children were screaming. I felt completely overwhelmed. I was standing there alone, feeling absolutely helpless, while everyone else was calmly moving forward with their journeys.
So what happened? Did you find it?
Well, let me tell you how I figured it out.
Wow, that was intense, wasn't it?
Absolutely. You could really feel the stress Sarah was experiencing. Did you notice how she used the past continuous to paint that picture of everything that was happening around her?
Right. Phrases like, I was standing in line and my heart was pounding and people were getting impatient. All of these help create that sense of chaos and urgency.
And the emotional vocabulary was really strong too. Words like panicking, frantically, overwhelmed, and helpless. These are perfect for describing those moments when you feel like everything is spiraling out of control.
Now, let's find out what Sarah did to solve this problem. Did she miss her flight? Did she find her passport? Let's listen to the second part.
Okay, so you were at the airport, totally panicking, and your flight was about to leave. What happened next?
Well, I decided I was going to call the taxi company first. I thought maybe I had left my passport in the car. While I was dialing the number, I remembered something. I had stopped at a coffee shop right before entering the airport.
Oh, so you thought you might have left it there?
Exactly. I wasn't sure, but it was worth checking. I told myself, I'll try the coffee shop first, and if it's not there, then I'll call the taxi. So I ran, and I mean really ran, back to the entrance.
Was the coffee shop still open?
Yes, thank goodness. I burst through the door, completely out of breath, and the barista looked at me like I was crazy. I asked him, did anyone turn in a passport? A blue one. And he smiled and said, are you Sarah?
No way. He had it?
He had it. I had left it on the counter when I was paying for my coffee. Apparently, I was so distracted that morning that I just walked away without it. He'd been keeping it safe, hoping someone would come back for it.
That's amazing. What did you do then?
I thanked him about 1,000,000 times, and then I sprinted back to the terminal. I looked at my watch, and there were only 15 minutes left before the gate closed. I knew I was going to have to run faster than I've ever run in my life.
Did you make it?
Barely. I was sweating, gasping for air, and probably looked like a complete mess. When I finally arrived at the gate, the staff were just about to close the door. I handed them my passport and boarding pass, and they let me through. One of them said, you're lucky, 1 more minute and we would have left without you.
Oh my God, that's cutting it so close.
I know. When I got on the plane and sat down, I felt this huge wave of relief wash over me. I was exhausted, but I was also so grateful. I promised myself I'm going to be much more careful from now on. I'll double-check everything before I leave for the airport.
I don't blame you. That's the kind of experience that teaches you a lesson you'll never forget.
Definitely. And you know what? The trip ended up being wonderful. But those 20 minutes at the airport, I never want to relive that again.
What a relief that Sarah found her passport. I was genuinely worried for a moment there.
Me too. But this story is a perfect example of how useful the past continuous really is. When you're telling a story about something stressful or chaotic, you need to describe multiple actions happening at the same time. That's exactly when this tense shines.
Absolutely. Notice how Sarah said things like, I was standing in line, and people were getting impatient. She's setting the scene, helping us visualize what was going on around her. It makes the story much more vivid and engaging.
Another important thing to highlight is the difference between will and going to that we heard in the second part. Do you remember when Sarah said, I was going to call the taxi company? That shows a plan or intention she had at that moment.
Right. And then she said, I'll try the coffee shop first. That's will for a decision she made in the moment, not something she had planned beforehand. Understanding this distinction helps you sound more natural when you're speaking about your plans and decisions.
Exactly. And one more thing, emotional vocabulary. If you want to express how you're feeling in stressful situations, words like panicking, overwhelmed, frantically, and helpless are incredibly useful. They're much more specific than just saying, I felt bad.
Great point. These kinds of words allow you to communicate your emotions more precisely, which makes your English much more expressive.
Now, speaking of stressful situations, let's move on to our next topic. Have any of you ever had to search for an apartment in a new city?
Oh, that can be just as nerve-wracking as losing your passport. Today we're going to listen to a conversation between two people and a rental agent. They're looking at an apartment, and as you'll hear, they have very different opinions about it.
This is a really practical conversation because it involves negotiation, expressing opinions, and discussing conditions. You'll hear a lot of useful vocabulary related to housing, and you'll also notice how people use conditional sentences when they're considering options.
In the first part, they'll be taking a tour of the apartment. Pay attention to how they describe what they see and how they express their feelings about the place. One person is excited, the other, not so much.
And in the second part, things get interesting because they'll start negotiating the terms of the rental agreement. That's where you'll hear questions about rent, bills, pets, and move-in dates.
All right, let's listen to the first part. Here's the apartment tour.
So, here we are. This is the living room. As you can see, it's quite spacious, and there's plenty of natural light coming through those windows.
Wow, I really like it. The space feels open, and I love how bright it is. What do you think, Lisa?
I don't know. It's nice, but the windows face the street. Won't it be noisy?
Well, this is a busy area, so there is some street noise during the day. However, most of our tenants say they get used to it pretty quickly.
I'm not sure I would. I work from home, so I need a quiet environment. If I'm on calls all day, I can't have cars honking in the background.
That's a good point. But look at this kitchen. It's modern and there's so much counter space. We could actually cook proper meals here.
The kitchen is nice, I'll give you that. But, Jake, have you noticed how small the bedroom is? Where are we going to put all our furniture?
The bedroom is a bit cozy, yes, but many couples find it comfortable. Plus, there's a decent-sized closet right here.
See? We'd manage. And honestly, the location is perfect. We'd be close to the metro, the park, and all those restaurants we like.
True, but if we're going to pay this much in rent, I'd expect a bit more space. And what about the neighbors? Have there been any complaints about noise?
Well, the couple upstairs has a young child, so there might be occasional noise during the day. But they're very respectful, and we haven't had any serious complaints.
A young child? So we'd hear footsteps and crying at random hours?
Lisa, kids make noise. That's normal. Besides, we won't be home during the day anyway.
You won't be home. I will. And I really need to concentrate when I'm working.
I understand your concern. If noise is a major issue, I could show you another unit on the top floor. It's quieter, but it's slightly more expensive.
How much more expensive are we talking?
About $150 extra per month.
That might be worth it if it means I can actually focus on my work.
150? That's a lot, Lisa. This place already stretches our budget. I think we should at least consider this one seriously before looking at something pricier.
I hear you, but I just don't want to regret this decision later. What if we move in and realize we can't stand the noise?
Tell you what, why don't you both think it over? We can discuss the details, and if you're interested, we can talk about the lease terms and see if we can work something out.
That sounds fair. What do you say, Lisa?
Fine. Let's hear what the conditions are. But I'm not making any promises yet.
Okay, so we've just heard the apartment tour, and it's clear that Jake and Lisa have very different opinions about the place.
Definitely. Jake seems really excited about it. He loves the brightness, the kitchen, and the location. But Lisa has some serious concerns, especially about the noise.
This is such a common situation when two people are making a big decision together. One person sees the positives and the other focuses on the potential problems. It's all about finding a compromise.
Exactly. And did you notice the vocabulary they used? Words like spacious, natural light, cozy, and stretches our budget are all really useful when you're talking about housing and money.
Now let's move on to the second part, where things get even more interesting. Jake and Lisa are going to sit down with Mark and discuss the rental agreement. This is where negotiation comes into play.
You'll hear them asking specific questions about rent, bills, pets, and the move-in date. Pay attention to how they phrase their questions and how they express conditions, like, if we agree to this, then can we have that?
All right, let's listen to the negotiation.
So, have you two had a chance to talk it over?
We have, and we're interested. But we'd like to discuss a few things before we commit.
Of course. What would you like to know?
First, the rent. You mentioned it's $2,000 a month, right? Is that negotiable at all?
The price is fairly firm, but if you're willing to sign a longer lease, say 18 months instead of 12, I could bring it down to $1,950.
That's $50 less per month. Over 18 months, that's $900 in savings.
That's not bad. But what about utilities? Are they included in the rent?
No, utilities are separate. You'd be responsible for electricity, water, and internet. Gas is included, though, since the heating is centralized for the building.
Okay, so we'd need to budget for those on top of rent. How much do utilities usually run per month?
Most tenants spend around $100 to $150, depending on usage.
That's manageable. What about pets? We've been thinking about getting a cat. Is that allowed?
Pets are allowed, but there's a pet deposit of $300. It's refundable when you move out, as long as there's no damage to the property.
$300? That seems high for a cat.
It's standard in this building. We've had issues in the past with pet-related damage, so the landlord insists on it.
Fair enough. If we decide to get a cat later, we'll pay the deposit then. Now, when would we be able to move in?
The current tenants are moving out on the 15th of next month, so the apartment will be ready by the 20th. If you need to move in earlier, we could potentially arrange something, but it would require coordination.
The 20th works for us. Our current lease ends on the 18th, so we'd have a couple of days to move everything over.
Perfect. One last thing. If something breaks, like the refrigerator or the heating, how quickly can we expect repairs?
We have a maintenance team on call. For emergencies, they respond within 24 hours. For non-urgent issues, it's usually within 3 to 5 business days.
That's reasonable. And what about the neighbors upstairs? If the noise becomes a real problem, is there any way to address it?
Absolutely. We have a noise policy in the building. If there are repeated disturbances, you can file a cloak and we'll address it with the tenant.
All right, I think we've covered everything. Lisa, what do you think?
I still have reservations about the noise, but the terms seem fair. If we're signing for 18 months and getting that discount, I suppose it's worth trying.
Great! I'll prepare the paperwork. You'll need to provide proof of income, references, and a deposit equal to 1 month's rent. Once that's sorted, we can finalize everything.
Sounds good. We'll get those documents to you by the end of the week.
And if the noise does become unbearable, we'll definitely be in touch.
Of course. I'm confident you'll both be happy here.
Well, that was quite the negotiation. Jake and Lisa really covered all their bases before signing that lease.
They did. And this conversation is packed with useful language that you can apply in so many real-life situations, not just when you're renting an apartment.
Absolutely. Let's break down some of the key points. First, let's talk about asking polite questions when you're negotiating. Did you notice how Lisa asked, "Is that negotiable at all?" instead of just saying, "Can you lower the price?"
Right. Adding phrases like "at all" or "by any chance" makes your questions sound more polite and less demanding. Another example would be, "Would it be possible to," or "Do you think we could?" These are much softer ways to make requests.
Exactly. Now, one common mistake that B1 and B2 learners make is confusing if and when in conditional sentences. Remember when Jake said, "If we decide to get a cat later, we'll pay the deposit then?" He used if because it's uncertain. They might get a cat, or they might not.
Good point. But when Lisa said, "When you move out, as long as there's no damage," she used when because moving out is certain. It will happen eventually. So the rule is, use if for uncertain situations and when for things that are definite or expected to happen.
Another thing worth mentioning is how to express conditions and agreements. Mark said things like, "If you're willing to sign a longer lease, I could bring it down to 1950. That structure, "If you do X, I can do Y," is super useful in negotiations.
And also notice the phrase "as long as" that Mark used. The deposit is refundable as long as there's no damage. This means on the condition that, or provided that. It's a really natural way to express requirements in English.
Now, let's talk about vocabulary. When you're discussing housing, there are some words you'll use all the time. Spacious, cozy, utilities, deposit, lease, and landlord. These are essential if you ever need to rent a place or even just talk about where you live.
One more thing, and this is a mistake I hear often, is the difference between rent and rental. Rent is the money you pay each month, like the rent is $2,000. But rental refers to the agreement or the property itself, like a rental agreement or a rental car.
Great distinction. Oh, and here's another common error, saying, "How much costs it?" instead of "How much does it cost?" Remember, in questions, you need the auxiliary verb does or do. So it's always, "How much does the rent cost?" or "How much do utilities run per month?"
Exactly. And speaking of questions, did you notice how Jake and Lisa used a lot of clarifying questions? What about utilities? What about pets? And what about the neighbors? This is a really natural way to bring up new topics in a conversation without sounding abrupt.
Yes. It keeps the conversation flowing smoothly. Instead of making a list of demands, they're asking questions and showing they're genuinely interested in understanding the conditions.
One last grammar point. Modal verbs for expressing possibility and permission. Mark said, "We could potentially arrange something and pets are allowed." The word could shows possibility, while are allowed shows permission. These are different from can, which is more direct.
Right. Could is softer and more polite, especially when you're talking about things that aren't guaranteed, and are allowed or are permitted are the formal ways to talk about rules and permissions.
So, to sum up, be polite when negotiating, use if and when correctly, learn housing vocabulary, and practice asking clarifying questions. These skills will help you not just with renting apartments, but in any situation where you need to discuss terms and conditions.
Absolutely. And remember, negotiation isn't about being aggressive. It's about finding a solution that works for everyone involved.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. We've covered quite a lot, haven't we?
We really have. Let's do a quick recap. We started with Sarah's airport nightmare, where we explored the past continuous tense and emotional vocabulary. Those racing thoughts, the panic, the chaos, all described using language that painted a vivid picture of what she was experiencing.
Then we moved on to Jake and Lisa's apartment hunt. We heard them touring a place with very different opinions and then negotiating the rental terms. That gave us a chance to look at conditional sentences, polite questions, and all that essential vocabulary related to housing.
Throughout the episode, we highlighted common mistakes that learners at the B1 and B2 levels often make, like confusing if and when, or mixing up rent and rental. Small details, but they make a big difference in how natural you sound.
Exactly. And the best part is, all of this vocabulary and grammar isn't just for exams or textbooks. It's for real life. Whether you're traveling, looking for a place to live, or just having a conversation, these are the tools that will help you communicate more confidently.
So, if you enjoyed today's episode and found it helpful, we'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to our podcast. That way, you won't miss any future episodes.
And give us a like. It helps other learners discover the podcast too.
Oh, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when we release new content. We have some exciting topics coming up.
And remember that request we made at the beginning? Head over to the comments and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, what you love about your country, and maybe something you'd like to see improved. We'd genuinely love to hear from you.
Building this community is what makes this podcast so special. We're all here to learn together, share experiences, and support each other along the way.
All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Stay curious, stay motivated, and most importantly, enjoy the journey of learning English.
See you soon.
Bye, everyone!